Hello. I need space to explore myself, Olivia declared, her voice steady as she delivered the words that would unravel our 8 years of marriage. I sat across from her at our kitchen island, the same spot where we'd shared countless morning coffees, now transformed into a battlefield of trust. The September rain tapped against our windows, a fitting backdrop to this surreal moment. What exactly does that mean? I asked, though the knot in my stomach already knew. My hands gripped my coffee mug too tightly, knuckles white with tension. I think we should try an open marriage, James. She met my eyes with that determined look I'd once admired. We're both still young, only 32. Don't you ever wonder what else is out there? I didn't. What I wondered was when my wife had started viewing our marriage as a prison rather than a partnership. But I listened as she outlined her carefully prepared arguments about modern relationships, personal growth, and breaking free from societal constraints. Each word felt like another crack in the foundation of what I'd thought was a solid marriage. I've already met someone, she admitted finally, and the mug in my hand nearly shattered. Nothing's happened, she added quickly. His name is Nathan. He's a client at the yoga studio. I wanted to be honest with you first. Honest. The word tasted bitter. How long have you been planning this? A few months, she said, reaching for my hand. I pulled back. James, please understand. I'm not asking to end our marriage. I love you. I just need more. More. The word echoed in my head as I remembered the past few months. Her late-night yoga sessions, the new clothes, the mysterious text messages she'd smile at when she thought I wasn't looking. All the classic signs I'd chosen to ignore. And if I say no? Her expression hardened slightly. Then I'll be unhappy. Is that what you want? I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. What I wanted a wife who valued our marriage vows. I wanted a partner who didn't treat commitment like a part-time job. You're being dramatic, she sighed, rolling her eyes. This could be good for both of us. You could explore too. Meet new people. I don't want to meet new people, Olivia. I married you. But she was already pulling out her phone, thumbs typing rapidly. Look, Nathan's hosting a poly discussion group next weekend. Why don't we go together? Just to learn more. I watched her, this stranger wearing my wife's face, and something cold settled in my chest. Sure, I heard myself say. Let's do that. Her face lit up, and she rushed to hug me. I returned the embrace mechanically, my mind already racing. Because in that moment, I realized two things. First, my wife was already gone, lost to whatever fantasy she'd constructed with this Nathan person. And second, she had severely underestimated how far I would go to uncover the full truth. That night, after Olivia fell asleep, I began my research. Not about polyamory or open marriages, but about digital forensics and GPS tracking. If she wanted to explore, fine. But I would be doing some exploring of my own. The next week crawled by like a nightmare in slow motion. Olivia floated around our house with newfound energy, spending hours on the phone with her poly-friendly friends, curating her wardrobe, and discussing boundaries, a concept she seemed to have recently discovered despite trampling all over ours. I played my part. Attentive, curious, even supportive. Every question I asked about Nathan fed into her excitement, and every detail she shared was another piece of evidence I carefully documented. Nathan Phillips, 38, divorced, owner of Spirit Flow Yoga Studios, 3 locations in the city, a spiritual entrepreneur who hosted weekly meditation sessions that had recently become invitation-only. I learned more about him through Olivia's careless enthusiasm than any private investigator could have uncovered. He's so in tune with himself, she gushed one evening while I cooked dinner, her favorite pasta dish that she now barely touched. You'll understand when you meet him, James. He has this way of seeing through all the artificial constructs society places on relationships. I nodded, dicing tomatoes with mechanical precision. Sounds fascinating. Does his ex-wife share his enlightened views? A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. I'm not sure. We don't really talk about his past relationships. Of course they didn't. because I'd already found out that Nathan's ex-wife had filed a restraining order against him in 2019, though the case was later dismissed. Olivia didn't need to know that I'd paid for a background check. Just like she didn't need to know about the tracking software I'd installed on her phone, or the small voice-activated recorder hidden in her car. The poly discussion group was held at Nathan's loft downtown, a converted industrial space with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows. About 20 people sat in a circle on cushions, drinking kombucha and sharing their journeys. I watched as Nathan, tall and lean with carefully maintained stubble and a man bun, led the discussion with practiced charisma. "Marriage as we know it is a construct," he declared, his eyes lingering on Olivia. "True love means setting each other free." I observed how he touched people's shoulders while speaking to them, how his hands stayed just a moment too long on Olivia's back when he passed behind her. The others hung on his every word, mostly younger women, a few couples looking uncertain, and 2 other men who had the same predatory gleam in their eyes as Nathan. After the meeting, Olivia was electric with excitement. "Wasn't it amazing? Did you feel the energy in the room?" "Enlightening," I agreed, driving us home. "Nathan seems experienced. He's been practicing ethical non-monogamy for years," she beamed. "He's offered to be my mentor, help me navigate this journey." "That's thoughtful of him," I said, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "When do you start?" "We're meeting for coffee tomorrow, actually, just to talk through some basics." I nodded, watching her from the corner of my eye as she texted rapidly, no doubt updating Nathan about my apparent acceptance. The recorder in her car would catch their conversation tomorrow, though I already knew what I'd hear. The same predatory playbook, executed by a man who'd perfected his technique through years of destroying marriages. What Olivia didn't know, what Nathan couldn't have known, was that I'd already spoken to his ex-wife. Claire had been more than happy to share her story over coffee 2 days ago. "He's a master manipulator," she'd warned me, her hands shaking slightly. By the time I realized what was happening, he'd isolated me from everyone who could have helped. That night, as Olivia slept peacefully beside me, I reviewed the evidence I'd gathered and made 3 phone calls. The first to a lawyer who specialized in both divorce and criminal law. The second to a private investigator who'd been documenting Nathan's pattern with other married women. And the third to Claire, who had agreed to help me expose everything. The next morning, I kissed Olivia goodbye as she left for her coffee date, the recorder in her car capturing every moment of her excited phone conversation with her new mentor. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But as I opened my laptop and began executing the plan I'd spent a week crafting, I remembered her words. True love means setting each other free. I was about to show her exactly what that meant. The recording from Olivia's coffee meeting with Nathan confirmed everything Claire had warned me about. His practiced lines about spiritual connections and transcending societal norms were interwoven with subtle manipulations that made my stomach turn. But what truly shattered me was Olivia's laughter, bright, genuine, and hauntingly familiar. It was the same laugh I'd fallen in love with years ago, now directed at another man's carefully crafted lies. "You're already so much more open than when we first met," Nathan told her. "James seems resistant. Are you sure he's the right partner for your journey?" "He's trying," Olivia defended weakly. "It's all new to him. Sometimes growth means leaving behind those who hold us back," Nathan suggested softly. "Remember what we discussed about attachment versus authentic love?" I closed the audio file, unable to listen further. The PI's latest report lay open on my desk, documenting Nathan's meetings with 3 other married women across his different studio locations. Each case followed the same pattern: therapeutic mentorship evolving into spiritual awakening, then sexual liberation, and finally the dissolution of marriages. The women would leave their husbands, empty joint accounts for retreats at Nathan's property upstate, and eventually be discarded when they were no longer useful. Claire's testimony had been crucial in understanding the full scope. "He doesn't just destroy marriages," she'd explained during our second meeting. "He destroys people's ability to trust, to love." I spent 2 years in therapy rebuilding myself. I was cross-referencing bank statements when my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Having dinner with the poly group tonight. Don't wait up. 2 hearts. The casual dismissal of our normal Thursday dinner tradition felt like another small death. I texted back, "Have fun. Be safe." Then I called Claire. "Everything's ready," she confirmed. "Are you sure about this?" "Once we start." "I'm sure," I said, thinking of the laugh in that recording. "Did you contact the others?" "Yes. Maria, Jennifer, and Tanya are all on board. Their husbands, too. The lawyer has everything prepared." I checked my watch. 6:30 p.m. Olivia would be arriving at Nathan's loft now, joining what he called his advanced practitioners group. What she didn't know was that tonight's session would be different. By 7 p.m., I was parked outside the loft, watching as more cars arrived. I recognized Maria's husband David, then Jennifer's husband Keith. We nodded to each other grimly. Inside my briefcase were copies of everything. The financial records showing Nathan's pattern of exploitation, statements from previous victims, recordings of his mentorship sessions that crossed every ethical and legal boundary, and evidence of the drugs occasionally slipped into drinks at these gatherings, courtesy of Claire's foresight in preserving evidence from her own ordeal. At 7:30, Claire texted, "In position with the reporter. Lawyer says go when ready." I took a deep breath, looking at the bright windows of the loft above. In one of them, I could see Olivia's silhouette, her head thrown back in that familiar laugh. For a moment, my resolve wavered. I thought about the morning we bought our house, how she danced in every empty room, filling them with dreams. I thought about our wedding day, the promises we'd made. I even thought about forgiveness, about couples counseling, about trying to understand her need for more. Then I remembered Nathan's words on the recording. Sometimes growth means leaving behind those who hold us back.
Go, he texted Claire.
What happened next would be carefully documented by the investigative reporter who'd been building a case against Nathan for months. It would include testimony from multiple victims, evidence of financial exploitation, and suggestions of criminal conduct that would trigger a formal investigation. But most importantly, it would show Olivia exactly who she'd chosen to trust over our marriage. I stepped out of my car, briefcase in hand, and walked toward the building. Behind me, I heard other car doors opening as David and Keith did the same. Above us, the loft's windows blazed with light, unaware that their carefully curated world of spiritual awakening and sexual liberation was about to meet something far more powerful: the truth. The loft's elevator ride felt eternal. Claire waited on the top floor with the reporter, Amy Chun from the city's most respected newspaper. Together with David and Keith, we made a solemn group, people united not by vengeance, but by a deep need to protect others from the pain we'd experienced. The scene that greeted us when we entered wasn't what anyone would imagine as spiritual enlightenment. Nathan sat on his elevated cushion, holding court over his followers. Olivia was positioned close to him, hanging on every word. The other current ments clustered nearby, while their spouses, those who still had them, sat in an outer circle, looking lost and uncomfortable. "Marriage is a cage," Nathan was saying, his hand resting casually on Olivia's shoulder. "But here, in this sacred space," Claire's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Is that what you're calling it now, Nathan?" The change in Nathan's expression was subtle but immediate, a flash of fear quickly masked by practiced serenity. "Claire, this is a private gathering." "Private like the gatherings where you drugged my wine?" Claire stepped forward, her voice steady. "Or private like the sessions where you convinced me to empty our savings for your spiritual investment opportunities?" Olivia's head snapped up, her eyes finding mine in the crowd. The betrayal in her gaze would have hurt more if I hadn't seen the same look in the mirror every morning for weeks. "James," she started. But Amy Chun chose that moment to step forward, press badge visible. "Mr. Phillips, I'm with the Daily Chronicle. We've been investigating reports of financial exploitation and sexual coercion across your yoga studios. Would you care to comment on the police report filed by Michelle Anderson last month?" The room erupted in confused murmurs. Nathan stood, maintaining his peaceful facade. "These are baseless accusations from troubled individuals who..." "Troubled?" David's wife Maria emerged from the group, tears streaming down her face. You told me I was awakened. Special. You said the same things to all of us, didn't you? Used the same lines about spiritual connections and authentic love. I watched Olivia's face as the truth unfolded. The color drained from her cheeks as more women stood up, each sharing nearly identical stories of manipulation, exploitation, and abandonment. Jennifer described how Nathan had convinced her to invest in a non-existent retreat center. Tanya revealed text messages showing his pattern of isolating women from their families. Nathan's mask finally cracked. This is harassment. Everyone needs to leave, or I'll call the police. Already done, Keith said quietly, holding up his phone. They're very interested in these. He placed a familiar-looking bottle of pills on a side table, the same ones Claire had documented from her time with Nathan. Olivia stood suddenly, swaying slightly. I feel dizzy. The rage I'd been controlling finally broke through. I crossed the room in 3 strides, supporting her before she could fall. What was in her drink, Nathan? The composed spiritual leader was gone, replaced by something darker. You have no right to interfere. Olivia chose this. She chose me. Like these women chose you? Amy held up a folder. I have statements from 12 former members of your advanced practitioner group, all describing the same pattern of exploitation, all with evidence. As if on cue, police sirens became audible in the distance. Nathan's remaining devotees began gathering their things, the spell finally breaking. Through it all, I held Olivia, who was staring at Nathan with dawning horror. You said I was different, she whispered. Special. But I was just next in line. Nathan's laugh was nothing like his spiritual leader persona. You were easier than most. So desperate to believe your boring life and faithful husband were the problem. At least the others took months to manipulate. You practically begged to be deceived. The words hit Olivia like physical blows. She turned in my arms, burying her face in my chest. A gesture so familiar it hurt. But this wasn't a moment for comfort. This was a moment for truth. I filed for divorce this morning, I said quietly, feeling her stiffen. Everything we've discussed here is on record. Your mentor is about to face some serious legal troubles, and you'll be called to testify. The police sirens were very close now. Nathan made a move toward the fire escape, but Keith and David blocked his path. In the chaos that followed the arrival of the police, the formal statements, the shocked tears of Nathan's other victims, I finally stepped away from Olivia. She reached for me, but I moved back. The aftermath unfolded like a slow-motion collision of truth and consequence. Nathan's arrest made headlines, not just for what happened in our city, but because similar stories emerged across 3 states. The spiritual entrepreneur had left a trail of destroyed marriages, empty bank accounts, and shattered trust that stretched back nearly a decade. Olivia tried to contact me repeatedly in the days that followed. Her messages evolved from anger to desperation to a kind of hollow understanding that hurt worse than her betrayal. I didn't know who I was anymore, she wrote in her final email. Somewhere between our comfortable life and Nathan's promises of enlightenment, I lost myself. But you knew exactly who you were the entire time. She was right. Throughout the whole ordeal, I'd never lost sight of my principles, my sense of self. When presented with the option to explore and grow through betrayal, I'd chosen instead to grow through protecting others and pursuing justice. It wasn't the spiritual awakening Nathan preached about, but it was real. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly quiet. Olivia didn't contest anything, not even when my lawyer presented evidence that she'd begun transferring money to one of Nathan's spiritual investment accounts. The judge's expression spoke volumes as he reviewed the case file, another victim of a practiced predator, but one who had chosen to ignore every red flag and warning sign. I hope you'll forgive me someday, Olivia said after the final hearing, her voice small in the courthouse corridor. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since that night at the loft. She'd lost weight, and her eyes held a weariness that made her seem older than her years. The designer clothes she'd bought for her journey hung loosely on her frame, and her carefully curated spiritual jewelry was notably absent. I forgive you, I said finally, surprising us both. Not for your sake, but for mine. I can't carry the weight of what you did, and I won't carry the burden of hating you for it. James. She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. Forgiveness isn't reconciliation, Olivia. You didn't just cheat on me. You chose to believe in a fantasy because reality wasn't exciting enough. You were willing to throw away 8 years of trust for someone who saw you as nothing more than a mark. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I loved you. I still love you. No, I said gently. You loved the idea of me, the stable, reliable husband who would wait patiently while you found yourself. But real love, the kind that sustains marriages and builds lives, requires more than empty words about spiritual connections and personal growth. It requires honor, trust, and the courage to choose your partner every day, even when it's not exciting. I left her there in the courthouse, her tears falling on papers that officially ended our marriage. The spring air outside felt clean, new. Claire was waiting by her car, her expression understanding. How do you feel? She asked as we walked to the coffee shop where this had all started, where she'd first shared her story about Nathan. Like I can breathe again, I replied honestly. The evidence package you helped me build has triggered investigations into 3 more spiritual mentors operating similar schemes. The reporter thinks it could turn into a major exposé about exploitation in wellness communities. Claire nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. So you're what, a crusader against corrupt gurus now? Maybe. I held the door for her, remembering how broken she'd seemed at our first meeting, how helping to bring Nathan to justice had healed something in her too. Or maybe I'm just someone who learned that real personal growth comes from standing up for what's right, not from running away from what's real. We settled into a quiet corner table, ordered coffee, and began planning the next phase of the investigation. Outside, I could see Olivia walking to her car, shoulders bent under the weight of her choices. For a moment, I felt the echo of what we'd lost, the dreams, the trust, the love that had once seemed unshakable. But as I turned back to Claire and our work of protecting others from similar pain, I realized that sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to let go, and the truest path to personal growth is standing firm in your values when the world tries to shake them. Thank you for listening the story to the end. Write your thoughts about it in the comments and do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next videos.